afternoon, everyone. I was about to say good morning. It's felt like a very long morning already today. Thanks for joining us. I can see the numbers ticking up, which is lovely. I apologise again for the last minute change of link to come and join us today. The ISE website is not back up and running just yet, but we'll all keep our fingers crossed that, at some point, maybe while we're on this call, who knows, maybe while this is happening, there's magic happening in the background and our wonderful support team will have fixed whatever the problem is. But that doesn't stop us enjoying a really great, useful, powerful session over lunchtime on this vaguely sunny Thursday. I'm delighted to be here. If you don't know me, I'm Sarah Hathaway. I'm the Joint Chief Exec of ISE. You may have also seen Stephen presenting at conferences or webinars. We have a Joint Chief Exec role, and my role and my team's role is very much looking after our membership. So I'm delighted always to be here because it means I get to hear all the good stuff and I get to be convinced that we're delivering value to you as our members. And if you're not a member yet, you can always drop us a line and we can have that conversation too. So without any further ado, I'm delighted to introduce James and Amanda. We're obviously here to talk about assessment, which is such a topic at the moment, coming up in our WhatsApp groups all over the place when we talk to employers, when we talk to our universities. It's really important, so I'm really delighted that you're both here. I'm going to disappear off screen. I'll pop back up later. Those of you that might wish to ask a question, if you'd be kind enough to put that in the Q&A box, if you right at the bottom of the screen is a Q&A box, please pop the questions in there. That's a little easier for me to come back in and manage at the end. Of course, feel free to chat to each other in the chat box as well. It's always nice to connect to other early talent professionals. So James, I'm going to hand over to you and I will see you at the end of the webinar.
Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everyone for joining. Welcome. My name is James Chorley. I'm the Talent Solutions Director here at PeopleScout. And we will be talking about an assessment process that we designed. I've got the lovely Amanda Callen with me today. Amanda, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, James. I'm a chartered psychologist, a registered occupational psychology practitioner with the HCPC, and at PeopleScout, I manage the team of psychologists that support assessment from end to end. Across the whole process.
Brilliant, thanks Amanda. So what we want to do today is talk to you about something that Amanda, you and your team have designed very recently, and you've been on your own journey of discovery, doing things differently in a different world that we're in now. So you're going to talk us through what you did and the discovery that you found and some of the different approaches that you've taken that it's fair to say you've not taken before. And what we'll do is we'll try and be as interactive as we can. As Sarah says, there's a Q&A box, but we've also got a couple of short polls for you to take part in. So we'd love to hear from you during the polls. There's only a couple of slides that we've got, so we'll take you through those as well. We want to talk about the design principles of what we did in designing a new graduate scheme and what was specifically different about that. And we had some unique challenges, didn't we, Amanda? So what works when we designed this new graduate scheme very recently? Just what were the biggest challenges that you and your team were facing when you were doing this?
Thanks, James. And this was a completely new graduate program, development program that TMP was setting up for the very first time for themselves. Obviously, we are involved in a lot of clients' graduate program assessments, but TMP was setting up its first in-house graduate development program. So we came in, the psychology team, to help look at what was the best assessment for that brand new program and the kind of graduates that we needed. And one of the unique positions that we were in is that we weren't coming into any legacy. There was no existing data. There was no existing content or process that could be tweaked, nothing we could look at that would tell us what had worked in the past. So we had a completely blank slate, and that's quite unusual for us. We're often working, coming in at a point that when maybe a program and its assessment has been running for many years. And one of the particular factors around that made this different was that there was no knowledge outside in the labour market about what this opportunity was. Because it was brand new, nobody had had any chance to understand what the role was. The role was being created from scratch. The rotations were being created afresh for 2025. And so we really had a chance to get out and tell people what the role was, what the company is, what the sector is that we work in. And to try and build in that knowledge from the first place so that people really knew what they were getting into. And then on top of that, there are the usual labour market, talent market challenges that we all have, which is, number one, that Gen AI is now changing the landscape of what candidates can use to help their assessment processes and to help them present themselves to employers. There are tight budgets, there are tight timescales that everybody faces. So, we had these factors to take into consideration. And it was the first scheme for TMPW for their graduates. And they were starting with a small number of hires. And that combination of having Gen AI recently available to graduates means if you're taking on a small number of people at the end of your process, the potential for any minor disruption that a few candidates might choose to use Gen AI in a disruptive way can actually filter through and have quite a big impact on your process. So we had some real challenges to deal with.
Yeah. And so what I want to focus on with this is, I mentioned it earlier on, in terms of doing something new that you'd not done before. So you didn't have an old framework to tweak. There wasn't anything existing. Small timescale, small numbers. What was it that was really different and bespoke? What was specific about this that you and your team did?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we felt fortunate not having anything that we had to work with, because it did allow us that completely clean slate. But that said, we, as everybody would, we needed to start with that firm evidence-based foundation of the right criteria defined for the role in the organisation. So, it goes without saying that we began with that research-based job analysis phase where we built up our assessment framework. And from that, we were then able to develop a bespoke set of assessments that would do exactly what TMP needed. And so we were able to rethink the sort of fundamental assumptions that underlie most assessment processes, and we were able to consider what the organisation wanted. And we put together a process that was designed, a 3-stage process, didn't rely on any third-party assessments or anything outside of the assessments that we designed specifically for the programme. And we based it on a model which we call reciprocal choice assessment model. And that was a real fundamental difference to the kind of assumptions that underlie most assessments. And what that is a system which prioritises match rather than selection. So it prioritises mutual fit for the candidate in the organisation, and then informs everything that you then do in your assessment process. And the other side of it is that we needed to make sure that we built assessment processes and tools that were Gen AI aware, that took account of the fact that Gen AI is a tool that lots of people are using. And we needed to design the assessment tools differently and communicate differently to make sure that we managed any potential risk there might be from disruption to the process by people using Gen AI. So what we did was we developed this 3-stage process. We did away with CVs completely. We know CVs are problematic anyway, but in the era of people being able to create amazing CVs with Gen AI, they become even less useful. So we threw them away. And the first stage was a very comprehensive application form, effectively, that built in a kind of holistic assessment based around scenario-based questions and a really solid, realistic job preview process element throughout the whole of the application form, so that people got a really good picture of what they were letting themselves in for while they applied. And then by the end of that, they really, could make a decision about whether they felt they were suited to the job and to the sector that, as I said earlier, people just didn't know about because our role didn't exist before this, but also enabled the assessors to have a fit score where they could then decide who would go through to the second stage. And the second stage was an asynchronous video interview. So pre-recorded video interview, and a lot of thought went into the types of questions and scoring that would go into that to make sure it was protected from Gen AI, because obviously if you give people, which you should, time to prepare their answers, some people will have time to prepare answers that are not theirs using Gen AI. And it's not proctored, so that's a risk you run. So we really had to think about how we designed that. And then the high scorers from those were brought in for an immersive, engaging, work sample based assessment centre. And we involved a creative team to create the immersive environment to engage the candidates in a realistic client-related task, that would be similar to ones that they will do when they join us, and the real challenges that we have. And we built the entire assessment process around that, whilst creating the opportunity for assessors to be able to really see the full range of assessment criteria that we put together in the beginning. And at the end of that, candidates were in no doubt of what the role required and some of the challenges and rewards that they would have if they joined us.
I mean, it sounds interesting. I want to focus on the reciprocal choice, because that's the bit I've not heard of before. I've not come across that term. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about what you did, what that means.
I know. Well, reciprocal choice model is the way we're encapsulating how this is different from traditional assessments. But actually, it's a really fundamental shift in the mindset that goes into designing the process. And it's really key to the changes that we made to traditional processes. So it basically prioritizes of equal value the choice that the candidate will make about you as a future employer, with the choice that you make about them as your future employee. And the reason that it's different is that most assessments are prioritizing the ability of the organisation to select the best candidate for their roles. And most processes are built very much around, giving assessment opportunities to see candidates perform their best, competing against other people, and then allow the organisation to make the choice of who they want, usually taking the kind of top group. But that kind of approach is based on some underlying assumptions that probably, don't get thought about too often. And one of the joys of having a completely blank slate is you get a chance to look at those. And that's what we were able to do. And the assumptions really are that we wanted to rethink were that ability and competence are the best things that you should assess as an organisation. That's your job. You go out and find the person who's with the most intelligent, the has the strongest behaviours already. You work your assessment process to assess that, and that all graduates in the labour market can be kind of ordered. As long as you find the right assessments, you'll be able to order those graduates, and you're in a sort of talent war to find those best graduates and attract them to your candidates. So you're all in trying to get the same 100 grads or whatever. And another assumption is that all of those graduates that are in that top tier are equally suitable for you, that they all want to join you, that there's no need to think about what they need and their unique aspirations. And I know that we all often processes will give time for that and people to say, what they want and also to question, but actually it doesn't underpin the way that we design assessment tools and processes to assess people. It's not embedded.
So it's taking it to that next step, isn't it?
It does. It takes it to it turns it on its head as well. It says your job as an assessor and as an employing organisation is to give your candidates as much opportunity as you can and as much authentic information about what's expected of them and what they'll get back from you and how their career will look as you have to actually find the right person. And so those are the kind of assumptions that reciprocal choice turns on its head. And it says you're not looking for the best, you're looking for the right person for your organisation. And that's actually fundamentally different.
Yeah. And what's interesting is after you told me about some of the stuff that you've been doing, I was looking at the latest Bright Network report, which I think I've got here. Let me see if I can share my screen. I think it's on the next slide. So I thought this was really interesting. This is from their latest report. And if anyone hasn't read it, I'd urge you to go and read it. So it's the What Do Graduates Want report that they publish annually. And this was one of their headline stats which caught my eye, which was, will you stay on your graduate scheme? So this was asked of people that are that've got themselves onto a graduate scheme. And Bright Network said themselves that it was a shockingly low 15% that I'll almost certainly stay with the scheme, which shocked me as well. You know, the hoops they have to jump through to get onto the scheme, and then only 15% saying, actually, yeah, I'm going to stay on that scheme. With 36% saying I'm definitely going to leave, or I will consider leaving, and then the rest saying I'm open to offers. So I think that stat alone is a good indicator that maybe we don't always get it right, in that we, like you say, we select the best, but how deep do we go in making sure that it's the right fit for both parties? And that really caught my eye. Okay, so that's reciprocal choice. What I want to do, Sarah, I think we've got our first poll that we want to ask the group. So simple question. For those that are running graduate early careers programs, we're just curious to know, in fact, I think it's the other wrong way round. So I don't know if you can get the other poll up instead of that one. We'll do that one a bit later. But if you could do the other poll. We're basically asking, do you think your recruitment process effectively highlights what it's like to work in your early, to have an early careers role in your organisation? So, if you could have a look at that, I think it's anonymous, which would be great to see what people think in terms of, does the process do enough to help the candidates really understand what it's like? So we'll just see what comes in. Great, thanks, Sarah. So we've got 16% saying yes, it really does highlight what it's like, which is great. The candidates are getting a really good view. Majority of people, 56%, somewhat. We've got images, we've got photo content, but we rely on job descriptions or recruiter conversations. 28% saying not really, we could do more to showcase the role and the day-to-day expectations. Good that no one's saying no, this currently isn't our focus, because it absolutely should be part of the focus. To your point, Amanda, really, your team have really embraced this in terms of, it's not just about photos and videos, it's really going to that next level to make sure that there's a mutual understanding of the right fit. Thanks for all those that took part. I guess with the reciprocal choice, I've I've not come across it before. I think this is new to you and your team, Amanda. It's like a new thinking. What was the design approach? What was unique in terms of when you actually sat down and designed it?
Just unmute myself. We've always got to do that once in every conversation. Yeah, so I mean, apart from the shift in mindset, which I think is really helpful in just constantly revisiting how much is this a mutual process, how much is it a one-way kind of imbalanced power dynamic, then you can do some specific things to really build in the opportunities for your applicants and candidates to understand what they're getting themselves into so that they can evaluate themselves. So, you're looking to kind of integrate realistic job preview into various aspects of what you're doing. In fact, every aspect of what you're doing in the assessment process. And the typical kind of approach when people are thinking, how do we convey this to our candidates? How do we get them to know what we're offering? Is to create a realistic job preview questionnaire or something like that, or a day in the life of, or have some, kind of vox pops from people who are already doing, that particular role or come in as grads. And, that's all really positive stuff, and we support that. But what that does is it tends to fix that point fairly early on in the recruitment process, give people the opportunity to, understand whether the role is for them, and then the assessment continues in a kind of more traditional way. And what we tried to do was to say that's one aspect of it, but we're going to embed the realistic job preview element into every part of what's happening in the assessment. So I've mentioned the immersive assessment centre. Everything about that showcased what the day-to-day activities would be for those grads. I've mentioned the first stage application form. Part of that was a guided self-reflection exercise where candidates were asked to consider their own suitability and helped to consider it against what we had prioritised as the key performance criteria and the key fit criteria. So, and then we had situational application questions, which also brought to life different scenarios and challenges that they would face. So you're looking for all of your assessment to be designed to build that realistic job preview element in, and not just having the one point that the candidates can decide. So they go on a journey with you, so that by the time you get them to the assessment centre and the end of the assessment centre, potentially someone would then know enough to be able to say absolutely confidently, you're for me or you are not for me. And that is as much a part of what that process is. So, and that, that's something that, that can be done easily. But I'd say the other part of it, which is really important, is that if you do that, you have to help your applicants change their own mindset as well. If you've rethought what your assessment process is there to do, you still have a talent pool at the top of your funnel who are being assessed in a less interactive, reciprocal way in all the other assessments they're doing. So you have to help them come on that journey and understand that you value their choice and that they are going to have lots of opportunities to consider their own suitability, because that's not typical for what they would experience mostly in most assessments that they do. So you have to bring them on that mindset shift journey as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. All right, so I'm going to move on to something else you mentioned at the start of this. And obviously we're all talking about AI. You mentioned about thinking about it being AI resilient or considering AI in the process. And I don't think this is about it being AI proof. We're all seeing the impact of AI. The uptake is on the increase. All the data suggests that more and more people are using it. It's getting more sophisticated. And Amanda, for the past 18 months, you and your team, and I know I've been helping with this, have been independently researching the specific behaviours of candidates who've either landed a job or are job seeking. So what we mean by that is, what are they doing in the process? How are they using AI at the start of the process? How are they using AI during the recruitment process? And we've done quite a bit. We've done 3 rounds of research into this now. We've done general population, which we've reported on, and we're just concluding a study with Bristol University where we're looking at their graduate job seekers, so their final year, going and looking for jobs and trying to find out what they're doing with AI in the recruitment process. I'm just going to quickly share a slide on that. If I can find my mouse, have a look. I don't know if you can see, oops, that slide there. So this is just a snippet of the research that we've done, and do contact us if you want to see more of this research. We're publishing the report at the moment, but we asked students who were job seeking, were they using AI? Do you use AI at any point in your job search, job application, or even within the job process? And as you can see here, 69% of them said they were using it, and perhaps more surprisingly, 31% said they weren't. Although when we looked at the general population of people, it was markedly different to this. So there's a real shift between the general population and graduate job seekers. But like I say, we've got more research on that. So I know, Amanda, you had this in your mind because you've done the research, so you were already looking at this and thinking about this when you were designing. I want to just do the second poll, Sarah. I'm really keen to get the group's view on AI and candidate behaviour. So if you could put that up, brilliant. So what we're asking here is, how do you think candidates' use of AI will impact your hiring process? So that could be before or during the recruitment process, and you can select multiple here. If you think it's more than one option here, then please select multiple options. It'd be really good to see what you all think as a group. Okay. So what have we got? We have got 77, a really high percentage of people saying that it will make it harder to assess genuine skills and qualifications. I think that's I can understand that concern for sure. 31 saying it will enhance the quality of candidate applications, which is really interesting. Smaller percent, 15% saying it will create a more level playing field for candidates. 42% saying it will increase the need for stricter assessment methods, and 15% not sure. I think that's really, really interesting. Bit of a mixture there, I think, but obviously the majority of people thinking that it's going to become a harder to assess. And I think, Amanda, there's been a lot of hype, hasn't there, around the impact of Gen AI on traditional assessment tools. And I know that was the reason why you wanted to do the research. But I think it's fair to say that you don't think all is lost either. But importantly, what about this piece of redesign you did? What was your thinking when it came to it? What were your considerations having done the research?
Yeah, I mean, this is a evolving picture, isn't it, that they're all dealing with, and the capabilities of Gen AI are moving apace. And like you say, James, that we want to look at what the potential is, and we also want to look at what people are actually doing, and that's why we're doing the survey. But the reality is that Gen AI does allow people to present themselves inauthentically if they want to, or if they choose to, and to maybe take the place in an assessment process of someone who doesn't use it, who may be more suited for the role. And that's that I think speaks to that. Is it the second option, which is it will make it harder to assess skills and experience properly and find the right people. And that, that's the issue. And alongside that, the truth is we can't tell who's using it. I mean, there are extremes, and we've heard many anecdotes of people leaving in the little AI instructions once they've, copied and pasted their answer into the right place, and they've got the little AI instruction which said, cautions against taking it 100% accurately. But apart from that, if people are using it well, you often won't be able to tell, and so that does create that difficulty, or that potential for that difficulty of telling the right person from people who are less well suited. And obviously that's the entire job of your assessment, is to get the right people into your organization, and not to let people who have misrepresented themselves or significantly enhance their their skills and their experience to get those roles. And so the way that we approach it is first and foremost to see it like any problem we've had with let's call it cheating, even if we don't think it is that, but where people try and inflate before the advent of Gen AI tools, people would always try and find ways, some people, to get themselves through the hurdles that we as employers put them through in terms of assessment, so that they can get the job. And that's always happened. Gen AI just makes it much easier, and there's a tool that's accessible to everybody. But what we're always trying to do is reduce the error rate we've got by squeezing out the people who will use it for nefarious purposes, and making them a really tiny minority. And that's always been the challenge. And so one of the key tools, really easy tools in our armory, is to communicate with people very clearly about what expectations are about how they should and shouldn't use Gen AI, and why, and what they can and can't use it for. Because you not only, as the survey shows that you just shared, James, not only are there the people who are using it for some stage of the process, and many of those just to improve their the way they present themselves, but you have a significant minority who are not using it at all, and you don't want those people to disadvantage themselves in that process. And they may still have the kind of qualities and skills and potential that you're looking for. So you're really trying to ensure that you communicate very clearly with everybody about this is what we're expecting, and that you've aligned that with your organization and what your organization thinks is acceptable. So your assessment process is consistent with the messages that you are giving to employers. So you've got that real sort of authentic transparency from the employer side.
And that was something, just incidentally, when we did the research, it was a question we asked candidates and people that had landed jobs using AI is was there any transparency around how it should or shouldn't be used? And very, very few people said that there was. Most people said there wasn't really any guidance. So I think it sounds like an obvious thing, like you say, Amanda, but just putting the guidance on is a great place to start on how to use AI responsibly in the process. And it's different for different organizations, right? So
yes, and it's part of, you're starting the conversation with your future employees, and your psychological contract starts from the first point that you have any contact with them. So you want to get that right. You don't want to be, for example, telling them you may not use Gen AI in the process at all, and then come the first day of their job, you're saying, well, look, can you use ChatGPT to speed up your production of your marketing content or whatever? You need that to be consistent, and it will be different because of that for every organization. And with this process, we're very careful to make sure that the way that we talked about Gen AI was as authentic, transparent, and mutually respectful, whilst acknowledging this amazing tool that we know our organization will be using. Recruitment is, as we all know, looking at all different ways of using it in the assessment process, let alone, within the organization. And we wanted to acknowledge that and make sure that people were joining us in our desire to make sure that both of us could make the right decision about each other. And you can't do that if you're dealing with inauthentic skills and experience. So you know, and when we said we don't want anyone in a job that they don't want to be in. And as you said, what we're trying to do is build a process where we don't have people sitting in roles on day one or you know, second year where they don't really want to be there. And I mean, where they, you know, they don't really love what they're doing and, you know, feel that they're suited for it.
So the first thing, like you say, is just transparency at the front, you know, and like you said, there's always that minority of people that will bend the rules. They were doing it before Gen AI, but at least setting out your stall. What else? What are the considerations when you were designing the process around being just a little bit more Gen AI resilient, let's call it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you know, if you have an existing process, you can kind of stress test every point of your process, you know, and work out where are your vulnerabilities, where is the potential disruption. With where we were designing everything bespoke, and so we had an opportunity to build in and use design principles that encouraged authenticity to be rewarded with higher scores. And so, for example, you know, a key stage, as I mentioned earlier, was the video interview. You know, it's a risk point. If people want to use Gen AI, they can. They have the time and the opportunity, and no one's seeing it. And so what we did was we designed the questions and scoring systems so that authenticity was given a higher weighting than the type of typical generic but on the surface of it high scoring and competent answers that would be given to a typical Viv that was focusing, say, on behaviours. We really built in the need to bring personal experience and idiosyncratic perspectives into answers in order to get that higher score, so that our higher scorers were going to be then the people that were able to really relate what we were asking to their personal experience and their personal skills, which Gen AI is no good at, doesn't.
Got you. Okay, so I think, you know, I won't spoil the research too much, but I know in the research, actually we were surprised that there were more people using it later on in the process, which is quite comforting, actually, that there's still quite a majority of people out there who are using AI very responsibly. And I think probably it's the minority of horror stories that you feel that are kind of skewing people's perceptions that everyone's cheating or everyone's using it. And, you know, these were anonymous surveys, and I think, you know, we're going to keep monitoring it, but it was a little bit comforting to say actually the majority of people are using it in a fairly responsible way, which is great. Okay, so I think, you know, for organisations that are following sort of fairly traditional assessment methods, or part of their assessment is still quite traditional, what would you recommend? Where could people start? And I know we've got some Q&A that we'll do in a second as well, which will cover some of this, but any advice that you can give having gone through this process?
Well, I think the real fundamental shift that made this different was that reframing of the assessment as a mutual assessment. And so I think there are lots of opportunities for people to think about their process, you know, granularly, and think about where you can introduce things that shift that balance of choice that you currently have. If you're looking at a part which is very one way, you know, we're assessing you, you do your best, and, you know, we'll make the decision. Then look at how you can, you know, change the balance of that and bring in opportunities for people to learn more about you in the process, and acknowledge the possibility and that candidates will be deciding at every point about you, however you assess them, whether it's one way or two way, they'll be deciding about you, and think about, well, can I tell them more that will help them make the right choice, that will help them evaluate themselves? And you can just look at your process bit by bit and do that, and you can bring in things like more opportunities for those realistic job preview elements to kind of appear at all parts of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the very beginning right through to the very end. You know, you can add it to your careers site. You can talk more about fit than you currently talk about selection, for example. You can also introduce more insights into the role when you've got people face to face and you're actually designing your assessment centre, rather than having a generic problem solving exercise. Really link it to the types of problems that, you know, people will have to solve when they come and join your graduate program. You know, there's lots of points at which that can be done without having to overhaul or transform an assessment process.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, thank you for that, Amanda. I know we've got some questions, Sarah. So I think some people have put Q&A, some people put in the chat, but that's fine. Well, hopefully we can cover them.
I know, it always happens. I'm going to go to the Q&A first. And I think you've partly answered this, Amanda, actually, but just to kind of confirm, you're not using any software in there to test whether Gen AI has been used in that. You mentioned skills and evidence briefly, because that is harder for Gen AI to replicate.
We don't. We're not using any software to detect. And part of the reason for that, part of the reason is that it's not very effective. And the kinds of errors that currently you see are good people being excluded by the nature of the way they express themselves naturally. Some people being identified as using Gen AI when they're not. And then other people who are using it in a very sophisticated way getting through the process. So you're not particularly helping yourself, because, you know, everybody has a smaller number of people at the end that they want to appoint. And in that, you want to make sure that you're, you know, in that pool, you haven't got all those people who've really managed to use it well enough to fool your assessment process. And you know, I mean, people will know that, you know, lots of universities have stopped using this because it introduces bias for non-native English speakers or American English speakers, and will identify people as using Gen AI when they haven't. So if you have a system which automatically kind of spots Gen AI or flags Gen AI, you've got a bit of a problem there. And what we did do is support our assessors and the people who were reviewing the video interviews to be able to tell what an authentic idiosyncratic answer might look like, as opposed to a generic Gen AI answer. So we did support them, but we also asked them not to use that as a deciding factor. So they were not screening in and out. They were just being able to identify to help them like score. And then they would, if they had any concerns, they would flag it and somebody would look at it. But we at no point screened anyone out because we thought they were using Gen AI. What we did was try to build in design features that meant that most people didn't, and if they did, the scoring would sort of sift them out before they got to the face-to-face stage.
Lovely, thank you. I know pretty much everybody listening will be really interested in that approach. I find it really interesting. I've got lots of questions, but I'm not going to ask mine. I'm going to stick to this. So let me just dive over to the chat for a second and see what came up there. Don't worry, Josie, I've seen your question. I'm interested to hear more about how you ask candidates to self-assess how they fit with the key criteria on the application. Do you ask them to say how close on a scale they are to each, or explain it in words? And how does that work? And this was one of my questions. Have you noticed any differences between women and men? Women tend to be more self-critical on requirements. There's a lot of questions wrapped up in there, Keel. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So a lot of thought went into it. But we had, like everybody does, you have the limitations of what your process, you know, your software or the time you have for those people to do that we had all those to work around. And what we decided was the best approach was not to ask people to rate themselves. And I think part of that is because exactly the point you've said. Self-rating is not it has a lot of inherent problems, and a lot of those are about, you know, demographic differences. And we didn't want to introduce that. And you know, happily, we had a really strongly inclusive pipeline right through to assessment. So we feel that the results we had supported that. What we did was to give people a section within the application form where we we brought to life as much as we could key aspects that the Marmite aspects, I guess, you'd either love or hate. And we brought it to life as much as possible, as realistic as possible as it would be in the role, and then said, we want you to think about this. Is this kind of situation going to energize you? Is it going to mean you have to put a lot of extra effort in? Are you going to have to be someone you're not? Are you going to enjoy learning about it? And then we asked them just to say yes or no. And it was not evaluated in any way. So we did not ask to see their results. We made them do it because we wanted them to engage with what we were asking. But we said, this is about you deciding whether this role is for you. Take the time, please take the time to really think about this and whether this is something you want to do, because this is the reality of the world that you're coming into. And if you love it, then great. And if you don't, maybe just think about whether or not this is something you want to continue with. And we left it there.
I think that's lovely. I mean, the whole principle behind this has got so many benefits from what I can see. I mean, we haven't mentioned the renege word, but we just ran a session for employers talking about reneges and talking about that as an issue. And this approach at least gives people an opportunity to, before getting to that point. We know how expensive it is, we know how difficult it is, we know how much it can exclude other people who would have made it through the process if they change their mind at the last minute, and you're trying to bring that so much further forward for them and give them some agency in that. And I think that's,
I don't think we've had any reneges. It's a small scheme, albeit small numbers, Amanda, but I think that was because it's early days, but we haven't had any reneges yet, have we, Amanda?
No.
So
No, we had 100% acceptance of the offers that we made, and they are all engaged with us. And so, yes, of course, we'll keep an eye on it, but that was the intention. And I think it is about intentional design. What are you communicating to your applicants? It's that you have the right to say we're not for you. And we, just like we have the right to say that about you. And then if we're right for each other, amazing, So that's
the principle of work experience in general, isn't it? Right from school kind of upwards, is try something, and if it's not for you, that's as successful an outcome as deciding, I want to be an accountant, or I want
it's as much about ruling out as it is ruling in.
Yeah, it is. And you're kind of bringing that in a slightly different way. So very interesting. I'm going to go to Josie's question. As Gen AI, I can't say this today, my words are all over the place. As Gen AI continues to advance, it seems likely that CVs may become defunct. Employers being encouraged to rethink their hiring practices, potentially moving towards a more personalised approach. Do you think this shift would lead to more bespoke recruitment processes rather than standardised ones across companies? And I don't know if there's a subtext in that, Josie, because I'm not sure what organisation you're from, but from a university careers perspective, there has been a kind of time when it's quite easy to say to students, well, this is a standard process, you do this, you do that, you have an assessment centre, you're in. So I think maybe this question is leaning towards, well, actually, if there's many more different ways to do this, and you're illustrating one, how does that land with students? They're going to have to get their heads around a lot. Careers teams are going to have to get their head around different things. Where do you think that might, if we were looking ahead, do that? If we were in 3 years' time, how do you think this might have an impact?
Gosh, there's so much in there, isn't there?
Sorry.
No, there is really, and it's a really important question. And if you're looking at it from the point of view of how do students get themselves ready for this, I do think there is a likelihood that more bespoke assessments will become the rule, and that's partly because of all the reasons that underpinned what we did for TMP. Because that's how you get the best fit. And given that we're talking about the best fit, I think where that leaves, you can't train on a generic assessment centre. You can train for developing the skills of going through that kind of assessment and having the opportunity to talk to employers and all that sort of thing. But you can't say, this is how you need to come across on this, this is how you need to come across on this, because organisations probably will move towards a more uniquely individual set of criteria. Now, that's not to say there aren't, some fundamental skills and behaviours that are going to be probably quite, sought after by lots of employers. But what it and those, obviously, if it's communication skills and how you present and some information, then those things you can practice, and they'll probably be useful in whatever assessment you go through. But I think one of the things that I think probably will be helpful to students is to spend more time really thinking about what they want to do, what they like, and how they research the roles that they are applying for, so that they get that right fit for themselves. And in a process, they only bother applying for things that they really have an interest in and want to learn more about. And actually, Gen AI is quite helpful for that. You can really research and explore, areas and sectors that you're interested in. And of course, when you're a newly graduated student, you're not in the same position as someone that's coming to the end of their career and has tried a load of things and has loads of information about what they like and don't. And so it's trying to, get yourself to a point where you can, you can use the tools that are available to you to get yourself in a position where you've fine-tuned a little bit where you're going to apply. Because one of the concerns I know is that Gen AI can be used for auto applications, and volumes can be going up in terms of applications, but those are not aligned applications. And I think you put yourself in a strong position if you align what where you think your strengths are, where you think your interests are and your passions, and where you want to develop with what the organizations are offering. So you might have to do more of that, the matching.
I completely agree. I mean, there's some really unhelpful headlines floating around at the moment, and there's a real fear factor amongst that sort of undergraduate population. And I know how hard career services are working to try and get that message across, that even outside of this very intense approach to that fit that you're talking about, just going back a few years, just really thinking about where you're going to invest your time and who you're applying for, because it should take a lot of time, it should take a lot of research. But yes, they've got a very easy solution to that. And when you see a headline saying I've applied for 1,000 jobs and haven't got an interview, you're just like, well, there's a reason for that usually. But it's kind of buried underneath there. Let's dive into this. Is a really good question from Eva, actually. It kind of linked to something you were just saying, but in terms of your process and being scalable, where you've got organizations that have a number of different graduate programs, so maybe 10, 15, 20 different business areas, that's a lot of investment on that fit, mutual fit agenda, but it can be done, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done. And if you're looking to get a completely unique individual into each of those 20 different programs, then you would have to do a huge amount of work. But generally, you can start at the organizational level, and which we did here, and think about what are the values of the organization, what's the sector we work in, what are the challenges that are typical that we face and that our grads will face across many of our schemes, if not all. And you start there. And even if you just get those things right and you bespoke your process for those things, you are already narrowing down the fit, and getting people who fit that and want to be in that kind of environment with those values and that vision and that mission. And so you can come in at the level I think that you want, and although there will be sort of, I guess, there will be unique behaviours and motivations at the individual function or even role level, you can bring those in at the back end of the process. So you build your top end of your funnel around those more common but bespoke aspects, and then when you have that face-to-face time with them, you can build in those more specific areas. And in terms of a realistic job preview, you can bring those in if you've got a system that lets people find the right path for them and identify the program they feel they want to apply for. Those realistic job preview bits that are all about even those behavioural and motivational things that are specific to your engineering scheme or whatever it is, they can be brought in for that subgroup of applicants at the top end of the process. And technology lets us do that sort of matching approach. So you don't have to define everything completely uniquely for a stream. You can think sort of creatively about where are the breakpoints.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Stephen's been doing a lot of work and a lot of, if you've seen any of his Future of Early Talent presentations around skills-based organisations and the kind of shift in towards that space, which plays to exactly what you're saying, which is, there will be some, not generic, but common skills, I think is your word, across multiple different functions with some enhancement beyond that. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense as an answer. And I think we've got one more question from Isabella, which is just hopping back to your pre-recorded videos and trying to protect against the Gen AI. So you mentioned the types of questions that were having different types of questions within there. Would you be willing to share an example of how you frame those?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I can't remember the specifics off the top of my head, so I don't have them here. But so first thing I'd say is that the scoring was as significant as the question structure. So we didn't use a kind of set of indicators that were generic to that particular. Let's say we were looking at creativity. Just say that wasn't in fact one of them, but it was defined more bespoke to the actual role. But creative elements were part of it. So we would have questions which would say, it would say, describe a time when you were instrumental in a creative endeavor. We want to know, and then we would set out, we want to know what your role was, how this related to the other people, if there was anyone in the group that made it difficult for you or particularly helped the process, and what your reflection is on that. And then aligned to that very closely, but linked to what good looks like for TMP, we would create indicators that mapped very closely to that, and sort of stress test it that it wouldn't positively rate more generic answers that are about, oh, I did this amazing thing, and we created this wonderful thing, which is what Gen AI currently is set up to do, get you the best answer. But it won't know you, and it won't know why, and it won't know what the unique contributions of the other people, good or bad, were. So it can come up with that, but then you've got to convey it as if it's you. And remember that we've also said to them, we're going to come back to some of these things and talk more about it, which we did in your assessment centre interview. So that is trying to squeeze out those people who are going to use it for bad, if you like.
Yeah, hope they go through. Amazing, thank you. We just had one pop up. Thanks, Lorraine, last minute sneaking on in there. You mentioned there was a very inclusive pool of hires, which is great to hear. In practice, how can I reassure my disabled students that this new way is going to allow them to shine when they face a whole lot of additional challenges and barriers? How many asked for adjustments as part of this process? And I guess if they didn't, you will have thought, I know you were an expert, on how you would manage that.
Yeah. We did. We had lots of people ask for reasonable adjustments. We, like everybody, know that the number of people that do self-identify, particularly in the new neurodivergent sort of group, are growing. And so number one, we designed it around the requirements of the job only. There was no kind of proxy assessment. It was very much, we're going to assess you on this. You're going to get a chance to try this out. This is part of the job. So I think, what that does is it says to people, I'm not going to be, there's not any part in here where there's room for, assessment of of anything that's not actually important, but also of anything that might be indicative of, my educational level, whatever it is. So it's about squeezing out the opportunity for bias. So we were very clear we didn't want to have anything in there that could be used in any other way than just looking at somebody's fit. And we dealt with about reasonable adjustments individually, looking at what people would need, and we then built that in, whether that be extra time, which wasn't our only option. It was, we would offer what we felt was supportive to them, because, if they looked at it and decided this is job for me, I think I want to give it a go. I've got some really strong fit competencies here, then we want them in the process. And we did have that, by the way, at the end. The assessment centre, we had 2 people in the final stage that needed and got reasonable adjustments so that they could perform to their best.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm conscious of time. It flies by, doesn't it? Thank you to everybody who was listening. Thank you for all your very intelligent questions. Much appreciated. I can't wait to see the research coming out from Bristol. Definitely keep an eye out for that. I'm sure we will help.
Do reach out if anyone wants to see that.
Yeah, please get in touch with James. I'm sure we'll be part of kind of sharing that out to the wider community, which is lovely. James, Amanda, thank you so much for your time and the investment. That was a really interesting session. I'm sure everybody learned a lot from it. And go and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.